What if I told you, sometimes the person you love most can cut you the deepest? What if one photo, one secret, could turn your whole life upside down? And what if the very thing meant to protect him became the weapon that saved her? Trust me, you'll want to hear this. Millionaire shows off mistress on vacation. Car recording helps pregnant wife win divorce fortune. The sun blazed down on the glittering coastline of Santorini, its sapphire waters stretching endlessly toward the horizon. A luxury yacht, cut through the waves, the kind of vessel that ordinary families only glimpse in glossy magazines. On the deck stood Adrian Knight, a self-made millionaire, raising his glass of champagne high into the air. His white linen shirt was unbuttoned just enough to reveal a chest tanned by indulgence, and his arm was wrapped tightly around a young woman in a scarlet bikini. That woman was not his wife. Cameras flashed from nearby boats, eager tourists snapping photos of the scene. Adrian didn't flinch. In fact, he leaned into the attention, kissing the woman on the cheek, as though daring the world to talk. For him, it wasn't just a holiday. It was a show. A performance of power, of arrogance, of a man who thought he was untouchable. Back in New York, thousands of miles away, his wife Lily Knight sat at home, 6 months pregnant and exhausted from morning sickness, back pain, and the heavy silence of a marriage that had turned cold. She scrolled absent-mindedly through her phone, her heart skipping, as one of those tourist photos appeared on her screen. The headline beneath it screamed, "Millionaire Adrian Knight seen with mystery woman in Greece." Her hands trembled. She wanted to deny it, to believe the tabloids were fabricating another sensational story. But the photo left no room for doubt. That was Adrian. That was her husband. And that woman, laughing as she sipped champagne on his arm, was clearly more than a business associate. For years, Lily had sacrificed everything for Adrian. She had worked 2 jobs while he chased his risky ventures. She had cooked meals out of scraps when they couldn't afford groceries, and she had been his constant cheerleader when the world told him he would never succeed. Together they had climbed from a tiny apartment in Queens to a penthouse overlooking Central Park. But in the process, she had lost herself, becoming little more than the silent, supportive wife in the background of his empire. And now, as her body ached with the strain of carrying their first child, she realized Adrian was flaunting another woman as if their vows meant nothing. Still, Lily wasn't the type to scream or throw things. She had always been quiet, steady, the kind of woman who endured rather than exploded. But as the yacht photo burned in her mind, something shifted inside her. She thought of the tiny heartbeat she carried within her, the child who would one day ask about their father. She knew then that she couldn't remain silent. She couldn't let Adrian humiliate her, or worse, raise their child in the shadow of his arrogance. The world saw a glamorous vacation. What they didn't see was the trail of lies Adrian left behind. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that in the back seat of his car, parked in a private garage in Manhattan, a hidden camera had been recording for weeks. Installed quietly for security purposes, it had captured more than he could have imagined. Conversations, phone calls, even late-night visits from the very woman now smiling on his yacht. And soon, that camera would become Lily's greatest weapon. But at that moment, staring at the glowing screen in her quiet living room, Lily didn't know just how powerful that recording would be. She only knew the man she had trusted, the man whose child she carried, had chosen to humiliate her publicly. The walls of the penthouse felt suffocating. She pressed a hand against her belly, whispering to the baby inside, "It's you and me now. We'll fight. I promise you that." She closed her eyes, memories flooding her mind. The night Adrian proposed under twinkling lights in Central Park, the promises of forever. The first ultrasound, when he actually cried and kissed her hands with joy. She wanted to believe those moments had been real, that the man she loved still existed beneath the arrogance. But the photo on her phone told another story, a story of betrayal she could no longer ignore. Adrian, meanwhile, basked in the spotlight. He believed he was untouchable, his money and charm enough to erase any scandal. He didn't realize that every smirk, every careless word whispered to his mistress, every cruel dismissal of Lily's quiet devotion was being etched into a digital record. A record that would one day play in a courtroom, in front of lawyers, judges, and flashing cameras. The yacht dipped against the waves, and Adrian laughed, raising another toast. "To freedom," he shouted, the wind carrying his arrogance across the sea. Back home, Lily's phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time Adrian was holding his mistress's hand as they walked through a cobblestone street, shopping bags swinging from their arms. The caption read, "Love in Greece? Millionaire knight and mystery woman can't keep their hands off each other." The nausea that had plagued Lily all morning rose again, but this time it wasn't pregnancy. It was betrayal, raw and undeniable. She stood slowly, her breath shaky but her resolve hardening. She wasn't just a wife. She wasn't just a victim. She was a mother-to-be, and she would protect her child at any cost. As she looked out the window at the glittering city below, she whispered, "If he wants a show, I'll give him one." Because while Adrian thought his vacation was just another chance to flaunt his wealth and his mistress, Lily was about to discover the secret weapon that would bring his empire crashing down. And when she finally pressed play on that car recording, nothing in Adrian Knight's world would ever be the same. Lily Knight had once believed in fairy tales. She wasn't born into wealth or privilege. Her childhood was shaped by second-hand clothes, shared bedrooms, and the quiet determination of a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse to keep food on the table. Growing up in Queens, Lily learned early how to stretch every dollar and how to find beauty in the little things. A walk in the park, a used paperback book from a thrift store, a Sunday meal cooked with love, these were her luxuries. From the outside, she seemed ordinary, the kind of girl no one would expect to end up in the headlines. She wasn't the loudest voice in a room, nor the type to chase attention. She had soft brown eyes that always seemed to carry more kindness than she gave herself credit for, and a quiet strength hidden beneath her gentle manner. Friends often described her as the listener, the one who carried other people's secrets without ever betraying them. It was that very quality, her ability to make others feel seen and heard, that had drawn Adrian to her in the first place. They met when she was 24, juggling 2 jobs to pay for night classes in business administration. By day, she worked as a receptionist at a small law firm. By night, she served tables at a downtown restaurant. It was there, on a rainy Thursday evening, that Adrian Knight had walked in. He wasn't the millionaire then. He was just another ambitious man in his late 20s, drenched from the storm, his suit jacket clinging to him as he slid into her section. She remembered how his smile seemed to light up the dim room. He was charming, yes, but more than that, he seemed genuinely interested in her. Unlike most customers who barely looked at her, Adrian asked questions. He asked about her classes, her dreams, her favorite books, and when she admitted she wanted to one day own a business of her own, his eyes lit up like he had found a kindred spirit. Their romance unfolded quickly. Within months, they were inseparable. Adrian would wait for her after class, walk her home, bring her small gifts like flowers from the corner shop or her favorite coffee. For Lily, who had grown up watching her mother sacrifice and struggle alone, the attention felt intoxicating. Here was a man who seemed to value her not just for her looks, but for her mind, her loyalty, her belief in him. When he proposed 2 years later, he did it in Central Park, under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights strung up by his friends. She remembered the way her mother cried, overjoyed that her daughter had found love. She remembered the promises Adrian whispered, "Forever, Lily. We'll build a life people will envy." For a while, he kept that promise. They lived in a modest apartment, saving every penny as Adrian worked tirelessly to launch his first company. Lily became his partner in every sense, handling late-night paperwork, making calls when he was too exhausted, even skipping meals so he could eat. She believed in him when no one else did. And when the business finally took off, when Adrian transformed from a struggling entrepreneur into a rising millionaire, she celebrated with him as though his victories were her own. The penthouse, the cars, the trips, those luxuries were new to her, but she never let them change who she was. Lily still wore her old jeans, still called her mother every Sunday, still volunteered at the local library when she could. But with success came distance. Adrian was no longer the man waiting outside her classroom with coffee in hand. He became the man who flew across the world for business meetings, who brushed off her questions with a laugh, who grew impatient when she asked for simple things like a date night or a walk in the park. When she found out she was pregnant, she thought it would bring them back together. She imagined Adrian holding her hand through the doctor visits, talking to her belly late at night, dreaming about the future with her. And at first, he did seem happy, genuinely happy. He kissed her forehead, cried when they saw the first ultrasound, even promised to slow down his work schedule to be present. But promises have a way of dissolving in the heat of ambition. By the time she was 6 months along, Lily spent most nights alone in the penthouse, listening to the echo of silence and the occasional buzz of Adrian's phone as he texted someone she didn't know. Her body ached, her emotions swung like a pendulum, and still she tried to be patient. She told herself he was under pressure, that he still loved her deep down, that things would change once the baby arrived. Until the day she saw the photos. The truth was undeniable. Adrian wasn't just distant, he was unfaithful. And not quietly, not discreetly, he was flaunting his betrayal on yachts, in foreign cities, under the gaze of strangers' cameras. For Lily, it was more than heartbreak. It was humiliation. She had given him everything, her youth, her trust, her unconditional love, and in return, he had treated her as if she were disposable. And yet, inside her grew a spark she hadn't felt in years. A strength born not from anger alone, but from the fierce love of a mother protecting her child. She wasn't going to be the quiet, overlooked wife anymore. She wasn't going to hide in the shadows while Adrian paraded another woman under the sun. Her life, her dignity, her child's future, they were worth fighting for. As she placed a hand on her swelling belly that night, she whispered, "You'll never see me weak again. Not me. Not us. We're going to rise." And little did she know the tiny camera hidden in Adrian's car was about to turn her whispered vow into a storm that would shake his empire to its very core. The Mediterranean sun spilled gold across the cliffs of Santorini, painting the sea in shimmering blues that seemed almost unreal. Luxury yachts floated like white pearls on the horizon, each one carrying the laughter of the wealthy, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the whispers of envy from those watching from the shore. Among them was Adrian Knight's yacht, the Serafina, named after a woman who wasn't his wife. It was a vessel of excess, 3 stories high, polished decks gleaming under the sun, and staff dressed in crisp uniforms tending to every whim of their employer. On its bow, Adrian stood tall, a glass of champagne in one hand, and his mistress, Celine, tucked under his arm. Celine was half his age, with sun-streaked hair cascading down her back, and a laugh that carried like bells across the water. She wore a designer bikini, red silk draped loosely around her waist, the kind of effortless beauty that screamed luxury. Tourists on smaller boats leaned over railings, snapping photos, whispering to one another. "Isn't that Adrian Knight, the millionaire?" Adrian thrived on it. He loved the attention, the validation of strangers recognizing his power and wealth. He leaned in, kissed Celine on the cheek, and raised his glass higher, shouting across the sea, "To freedom." The crowd on the nearby boats erupted in cheers, though they didn't know what freedom he spoke of. To Adrian, it was the freedom from responsibility, from his pregnant wife waiting at home, from the vows he had long since abandoned. The yacht's deck became a stage. Celine twirled, showing off the diamond bracelet Adrian had purchased just hours earlier in a boutique overlooking the Aegean. Paparazzi lenses captured the sparkle, hungry for the next headline. To them, this was romance, scandal, and power all in one. To Adrian, it was victory. He strutted through the bustling streets of Oya later that evening, Celine's hand firmly in his. The cobblestones glowed under lantern light, and the air was rich with the scent of grilled lamb, olives, and wine. Locals and tourists alike stopped to stare. Some whispered, others pointed, and a few bold enough snapped photos openly. Adrian didn't care. In fact, he slowed down, making sure everyone saw the woman on his arm, the designer bags swinging from their wrists, the way he carried himself like a man untouchable. At a seaside restaurant, he booked the entire terrace, dismissing families who had waited for hours for a table. "Compensate them generously," he told the manager with a smug grin, sliding a black card across the table. Celine clapped her hands, delighted by his arrogance, by the way he bent the world to his will. Together they dined on lobster and truffles, sipping the rarest of wines while the sea breeze wrapped around them like a lover. For Adrian, this vacation wasn't just about pleasure. It was about performance. Every move he made, every kiss he placed on Celine's lips, every laugh he let loose into the night air. It was all part of his theater of power. He wanted the world to see him not as a husband, not as a father-to-be, but as a man who could have anything, anyone. What Adrian didn't realize was that each photo snapped by a tourist, each headline typed into a gossip blog, each careless word spoken into Celine's ear was ammunition. Ammunition that would soon be used against him in a battle he didn't even know was coming. Back in New York, Lily scrolled through her phone in silence. The photos of Adrian and Celine filled her screen. Him feeding her bites of dessert, him placing a necklace around her neck in a jewelry store, him leaning too close, laughing too loudly. Every image was a dagger. And yet with each cut, Lily felt her resolve harden. The penthouse felt colder than ever. The silence of its marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows mocked her, reminding her of the emptiness Adrian had left behind. But Lily wasn't collapsing. Not anymore. She was studying, she was learning, and most importantly, she was preparing. Because what Adrian thought was a private vacation would soon become very public evidence. 2 days later, another set of photos emerged, this time of Adrian and Celine boarding a helicopter on a private helipad, his hand on her waist, his smile wide and careless. The gossip blogs erupted. Millionaire Adrian Knight moves on? Who is the mystery woman? Where is his wife? The world speculated, judged, laughed. But Lily didn't waste time with shame. She had bigger plans. She opened her laptop, scrolled through her files, and paused on a folder labeled car footage. Inside were hours of recordings from the small camera tucked discreetly into the back of Adrian's car. Originally installed for security, it had become something far more powerful. Lily had debated deleting it, afraid of what she might hear. But now, as she replayed clips of Adrian's whispered conversations, his phone calls to Celine, his dismissive words about her, "She's weak, she'll never leave," Lily realized she was holding the key to her future. Adrian thought the yacht, the restaurants, the helicopter rides were proof of his strength. In reality, they were proof of his downfall. And while the world cheered his arrogance under the Mediterranean sun, Lily sat quietly in New York, her belly rising with the life inside her, her heart pounding with newfound courage. Because soon, Adrian would discover that the stage he had built for himself in Santorini was nothing more than a trap. And the woman he had underestimated was about to bring the curtain crashing down. Adrian Knight had built his empire on risk. From his earliest days, he thrived on pushing boundaries, cutting corners, and charming anyone who stood in his way. To the world, he was a self-made millionaire, a man who had clawed his way up from nothing and turned his ambition into gold. But behind the polished suits and magazine covers was something far darker, an arrogance that grew with each dollar he earned. Power didn't just change Adrian, it consumed him. In the beginning, he had been the hungry entrepreneur who stayed up all night drafting business plans on napkins, the dreamer who begged investors for just one chance. But the more successful he became, the more reckless he grew. He no longer asked for chances, he demanded them. He no longer charmed with sincerity, he manipulated with precision. To Adrian, people were pawns. Every handshake, every smile, every promise was just another move in his endless game of control. By the time his company broke into the millions, he wasn't the same man Lily had fallen in love with. He became addicted to applause, unable to function without being admired. He wanted rooms to hush when he walked in, he wanted women to stare, he wanted men to envy. And slowly, he convinced himself he deserved it all, even if it meant betraying the very woman who had stood by him when he was nothing. That arrogance found its perfect audience in Celine. Celine Monroe was 23, barely out of college, with the kind of beauty that stopped conversations. She had grown up chasing attention on social media, crafting a life of filters and followers. Where Lily carried herself with quiet grace, Celine thrived on spectacle. Every photo had to be perfect, every angle staged, every moment curated for the approval of strangers. When she met Adrian at a charity gala, it wasn't by accident. She knew exactly who he was, what he was worth, and how to draw him in. Her laughter was too loud, her compliments too sweet, her eyes too calculating. Adrian, already restless in his marriage, saw in her the reflection of his own vanity. She adored him not for who he was, but for what he could buy her. And he loved it. With Celine, Adrian could be the star he craved to be. She fed his ego, telling him he was the smartest, the strongest, the most desirable man she'd ever met. She never challenged him, never questioned his late nights or his temper. She rewarded his arrogance with devotion. Not because she loved him, but because she loved the lifestyle he offered. The penthouses, the cars, the endless parade of gifts. Together, they were toxic. Adrian flaunted Celine because he believed no one could stop him. And Celine played along because she believed she had won. On that yacht, in those restaurants, in those stolen hotel suites, they built their own illusion of power. But like all illusions, it was fragile. Adrian's arrogance was his most dangerous flaw. He thought of himself as untouchable, forgetting that the same public he used to boost his image could just as easily turn against him. He laughed at rumors, dismissed scandals, and scoffed at anyone who warned him to be careful. People forget, he liked to say. Give them another headline, and they move on. But there was one person who didn't forget, Lily. Back in New York, while Adrian paraded Celine across the Greek islands, Lily sat quietly with evidence piling in her hands. Every careless word Adrian whispered to Celine in the car, every cruel remark about his wife, "She'll never leave, she needs me," was captured by the hidden camera. He never once suspected that his own arrogance had led him to overlook the smallest detail. He believed he was too smart to be caught. Celine, meanwhile, wore her victory like a crown. She had convinced herself she was more than a mistress, that one day she would take Lily's place. She loved when Adrian introduced her as his special guest, when people whispered behind their hands but didn't dare confront him. To her, it was proof that she was winning. She didn't care about Lily's pregnancy, didn't care about the vows she was helping him break. All she cared about was climbing higher, and Adrian was her ladder. But ladders can fall. The cracks in their perfect performance began to show. Celine's hunger for attention sometimes outpaced Adrian's. She posted photos that revealed too much, tagged locations that should have been private, and bragged to friends who weren't as discreet as she believed. Adrian, blinded by lust and arrogance, ignored the risks. He thought he was invincible. Yet behind the scenes, his empire was already shifting. Investors whispered about his behavior, employees questioned his judgment, and rumors reached boardrooms faster than profits. The same arrogance that had built his image now threatened to destroy it. And still, Adrian didn't see it. He was too busy playing the villain in his own story, too intoxicated by Celine's attention to notice the storm gathering on the horizon. Lily, though, saw it clearly. Every photo of Adrian and Celine wasn't just a betrayal, it was evidence. Every careless laugh wasn't just arrogance, it was a weapon. And with every headline splashing across her phone, Lily's plan grew sharper. Adrian thought the world admired him. What he didn't know was that soon, the world would watch his downfall. And when the recordings from his own car reached the courtroom, even Celine's smile wouldn't be enough to save him. The night of humiliation began with silence. Lily sat in her mother's modest kitchen in Queens, a mug of chamomile tea cooling between her hands. The baby shifted inside her, a reminder of the life growing stronger each day, even as her marriage crumbled. Her phone buzzed on the table. She almost didn't want to look, but something in her gut told her this message mattered. When she opened it, her world tilted. The message was a video, 30 seconds long, grainy but unmistakable. Adrian and Celine were stepping out of a chauffeured car, his arm slung carelessly over her shoulders, his hand lingering where no husband should on another woman. Flashbulbs lit the night like lightning. Paparazzi shouted his name, tourists gasped, and Adrian, instead of shielding his face, grinned. He grinned. "Mr. Knight, where's your wife?" one voice called out from the crowd. Adrian laughed, tossing back his head as though the very idea were amusing. "At home, where she belongs," he shouted. His words dripped arrogance, slicing Lily's heart like glass. He tugged Celine closer, planting a kiss on her lips in front of the cameras. "This is who I'm with now." The crowd erupted with questions, and Celine giggled, burying her face against his chest as though embarrassed. But she wasn't embarrassed. She was radiant, feeding off the spectacle like a moth to flame. The clip ended there. But it was enough. Lily dropped the phone onto the table, her body trembling. She wanted to scream, to throw the cup across the room, to collapse onto the floor and never rise again. But instead, she sat frozen, staring at the screen as if staring at the ruins of her life. Her mother, a woman who had weathered her own storms, touched Lily's shoulder gently. "Baby, you don't have to take this. You hear me? You're stronger than this." Lily's throat tightened, tears spilling hot and unrelenting down her cheeks. "He humiliated me. He humiliated us." That night, the story spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with hashtags, gossip blogs churned out headlines, and television anchors discussed Adrian's mystery woman with gleeful intrigue. But to Lily, it wasn't gossip. It was betrayal made public. The world knew what her husband had done, and worse, the world laughed about it. The following morning, Lily forced herself to attend her doctor's appointment. She needed to check on the baby, to remind herself there was still hope in her life. But even there, she couldn't escape the whispers. Two women in the waiting room glanced at their phones, then at Lily's rounded belly, their voices hushed but not hushed enough. "That's his wife? Poor thing. Imagine being pregnant and seeing that." Lily bit her lip until it bled, clutching her handbag tighter. Shame washed over her like a tidal wave. She wasn't just betrayed, she was pitied. That somehow felt worse. Adrian, meanwhile, reveled in his newfound infamy. He and Celine attended a lavish gala in Athens that very evening. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and diamond jewelry, the kind of setting where reputations were made and destroyed in a single night. Dressed in a tuxedo sharp enough to cut glass, Adrian introduced Celine to diplomats, investors, and celebrities, as if she were his rightful partner. Photographers lined the red carpet, capturing every angle. Celine clung to his arm, her gown slit high, her smile perfectly rehearsed. Adrian thrived under the lights, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, bragging about his latest deals. Then came the question that shifted everything. "Mr. Knight," a reporter asked, microphone thrust forward, "how does your wife feel about you being here tonight with Ms. Monroe?" The air stilled. Cameras leaned closer. Celine's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Adrian smirked. "My wife? She knows her place. She's at home, taking care of what needs to be taken care of. And I'm here, doing what powerful men do." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Some people laughed nervously, others whispered, but the damage was done. His cruelty was broadcast live, replayed across television screens and online platforms within minutes. Back in New York, Lily sat in the darkened living room of her penthouse, the words looping in her head like a cruel song. She knows her place. She pressed her hands against her belly, whispering to her unborn child, "Your father thinks I don't matter. But he's wrong. We matter, more than he'll ever understand." That was the night something inside Lily broke, and something else awakened. She no longer wept like a victim. She no longer begged the universe for answers. She looked around the penthouse, at the walls she had once thought were a dream, and saw them for what they really were. A cage built by a man who thought he owned her. Her humiliation had been public, yes, but she still had one thing Adrian didn't know about: proof. Hard, undeniable proof hidden in the car recordings. As she sat alone in the shadows, the city glittering outside her window, Lily realized her husband had just written the first act of his own downfall. And the moment she stepped into that courtroom with her evidence, Adrian Knight's smirk would vanish forever. The silence in the penthouse was unbearable. Lily sat curled on the leather sofa, knees tucked against her swollen belly, staring blankly at the city lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. New York sparkled as if mocking her pain. Every flashing billboard and glowing skyscraper a reminder that the world carried on while her life fell apart. The television murmured in the background, set to a gossip channel she hadn't meant to watch. But the moment she reached for the remote, Adrian's face filled the screen. He was walking into another glittering event, Celine on his arm, smiling like she belonged there. The host's voice dripped with excitement. And there he is again, Adrian Knight, the self-made millionaire, enjoying his European holiday with mystery beauty Celine Monroe. Sources tell us his wife, who is 6 months pregnant, is back home in New York. No comment from her camp yet, but one has to wonder, how long will she stay silent? Lily's throat closed. The cup of tea she had been holding slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. Hot liquid spread across her bare feet, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The weight pressing on her chest was heavier than anything she'd ever carried. Her phone buzzed again. More messages. More headlines. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out with fake sympathy. Stay strong. Thinking of you. Can you believe what he did? Every word was another stab. Another reminder that her humiliation wasn't private. It was global. The tears came then, hot and unrelenting. She pressed both hands to her face, her sobs echoing in the cavernous room. Her shoulders shook violently, her breath hitching until she thought she might collapse. She wanted to scream until the glass windows shattered. She wanted to rip the photographs of her and Adrian off the walls, the smiling wedding portraits that now felt like cruel jokes. Instead, she sat paralyzed, drowning in the memory of everything they had once been. The night he whispered promises in Central Park. The way he had cried at their first ultrasound. The gentle touch of his hand on her stomach when he first felt the baby kick. Were those moments real? Or had he been performing all along? She whispered into the empty room, her voice cracking. Why wasn't I enough? The baby shifted inside her, and guilt ripped through her chest. She shouldn't be crying like this, shouldn't be breaking down when she was carrying something so precious. But she couldn't stop. The betrayal was too deep, the humiliation too raw. For the first time, she felt truly powerless, like a woman stripped of everything, her dignity, her marriage, her future. The days blurred after that. Lily stopped answering calls. She avoided the news, but headlines still found her. She barely ate, surviving on crackers and water. At night, she lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the city below, her hands clutched around her belly as if holding on to the only thing left that mattered. Her mother called constantly, begging her to come stay in Queens, but Lily refused. She didn't want her mother to see her like this. Broken, humiliated, a shadow of the strong woman she had always tried to be. One evening, after another sleepless night, she found herself in the nursery Adrian had once promised to decorate. The walls were bare, the crib still unassembled in a box in the corner. She lowered herself onto the floor, hugging her knees as she stared at the emptiness. Her mind swirled with doubts. What if Adrian left her with nothing? What if she couldn't support the baby alone? What if she was doomed to repeat her mother's life of struggle, raising a child without help, scraping together pennies while the man who abandoned her lived in luxury? The despair clawed at her, whispering cruel thoughts. Maybe she wasn't strong enough. Maybe Adrian was right when he said she would never leave, that she needed him. Maybe she had been fooling herself all along, thinking she mattered. Her sobs filled the nursery, bouncing off the empty walls. She pressed her forehead against the unopened crib box and whispered, I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I can. But then something shifted. In the silence that followed, she felt a sharp kick from the baby inside her. Strong, insistent, almost defiant. She gasped, placing her hand on her belly, her tears freezing midstream. The baby kicked again, as if answering her despair. And in that moment, Lily realized she wasn't alone. She had been thinking of herself as a victim, as a woman abandoned. But she wasn't just herself anymore. She was a mother. She carried not just her pain, but her child's future. And that child deserved more than a broken woman too weak to fight. She closed her eyes, drawing in a shaky breath. The despair didn't vanish, but a new spark flickered beneath it, faint but real. The same spark that had carried her mother through years of hardship. The same spark that had once helped Adrian build his empire. Her hands pressed firmly against her belly. I'll figure it out, she whispered. For you, I'll figure it out. She didn't know how yet. She didn't know what steps to take or where to find the strength. But she knew she couldn't let Adrian's betrayal define her. She couldn't let Celine's smirk or the world's pity be the end of her story. For the first time in days, she stood up, wiping her tears with trembling hands. The nursery still looked empty, but inside her, something new had taken root. And the very next morning, a discovery inside Adrian's car would give her the weapon she needed to turn heartbreak into revenge. The morning after her collapse in the nursery, Lily woke with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror startled her. Red-rimmed eyes, pale skin, hair tangled in messy strands. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something new. A thread of determination ran through her expression, faint but undeniable. She touched her belly, whispering to the baby inside, "We're going to fight. I don't know how yet, but we will." That day she decided to leave the penthouse for the first time in weeks. She couldn't breathe within those walls anymore. They were haunted by too many memories of Adrian. She grabbed her keys, threw on a loose coat, and slipped into the private garage where Adrian's luxury cars gleamed like trophies. She walked past the gleaming Maserati, past the silver Porsche, until her eyes landed on the black SUV Adrian used most often. Something about it drew her in, maybe because she remembered him leaving in it on nights he claimed were business meetings. Her pulse quickened as she opened the driver's side door. The car smelled faintly of his cologne, sharp and bitter. She slid into the seat, her hands trembling against the steering wheel. For a moment she just sat there, breathing deeply, memories flooding in. The last time she had seen him drive this car, he was leaving in a hurry, brushing off her questions with a distracted kiss on her forehead. Her gaze drifted down, and that's when she noticed it. Tucked neatly under the dashboard was a small blinking light. At first she thought it was part of the car's security system, but as she leaned closer, her heart raced. It wasn't factory-made. It was a discreet recording device, one Adrian had installed months ago after a break-in rumor in the building. He had told her it was for safety. She hadn't thought twice about it, but now, staring at the blinking light, a thought hit her like lightning. What if it had been recording more than just car alarms? Her hands shook as she pulled her phone from her pocket. She searched online for the device's brand and quickly discovered the truth. It wasn't just a tracker. It had audio recording, hours, even weeks' worth, stored automatically. Her breath caught. With trembling fingers, she connected her phone to the device, following the instructions she found. Within moments, a list of audio files appeared on her screen, each marked with a date and time. Her stomach churned. The first file she clicked filled the car with Adrian's voice. "She doesn't suspect a thing," he was saying, his tone dripping with smugness. "She's too naive, too dependent, she'll never leave. Once the baby's born, she'll be so tied down she won't even think about it." Celine's laughter followed, high and sharp. "And then what? You'll keep sneaking around forever?" Adrian chuckled. "Why not? She's useful where she is. And you." His voice lowered into a tone that made Lily's skin crawl. "You're the fun I deserve." Lily's hands flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from rage. She clicked the next file. This one was even worse. "I can't wait until the divorce," Adrian muttered. "She doesn't even know I've been moving assets. By the time she figures it out, she'll get scraps, if anything." Celine purred in response. "And then it'll just be us. The empire will be ours." The empire. Ours. Lily's vision blurred. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Not only had Adrian betrayed her, he had planned to strip her of everything. Her dignity, her child's future, her share of the fortune she had helped him build. One by one she listened to more clips. Each recording was another dagger, but also another weapon. Adrian mocking her cooking, Celine mocking her clothes, Adrian bragging about how easy it was to manipulate investors, even hinting at shady deals he kept hidden from the board. It was all there, recorded, unfiltered, unforgettable. Lily sat frozen in the driver's seat, her phone clutched in her hand, her baby kicking inside her as if urging her forward. She realized then that this wasn't just evidence of infidelity. It was a map of Adrian's corruption, his arrogance laid bare for the world to hear. Her tears dried. Her breathing steadied. For the first time since the nightmare began, she didn't feel powerless. She felt dangerous. She copied the files to her phone, then backed them up to a cloud account, her fingers moving with surprising steadiness. Adrian thought she was weak. Adrian thought she would crumble. But he had handed her the very tool that could destroy him. As she climbed out of the car, the cold air of the garage hit her face, clearing the fog that had clouded her mind for weeks. She wasn't just a broken wife anymore. She was a woman holding dynamite. She looked up toward the elevator that led back to the penthouse, her lips pressing into a firm line. For the first time in months, she felt taller, stronger. Her voice was quiet but unshakable as she whispered, "You thought I was powerless, Adrian, but you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Because the next time Adrian Knight flaunted Celine in public, Lily would be ready, with proof that could shatter his empire in one single blow. The day after she discovered the recordings, Lily woke up different. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden lightning strike, no swelling orchestra of triumph. It was quieter than that, but stronger. She opened her eyes in the penthouse and realized for the first time in weeks she didn't feel crushed by its emptiness. Instead, she saw it for what it truly was, a battlefield. And she was no longer the wounded soldier. She was preparing for war. She slipped out of bed, placed a steadying hand on her belly, and whispered to the baby inside, "We're going to show him who we are." That morning, she called her mother. "I need your help," Lily said, her voice steadier than it had been in months. Her mother's relief was audible. "Anything, baby. Tell me what you need." Lily needed everything. Support, courage, a reminder that she came from a line of women who endured hardship and still stood tall. She packed a bag and left the penthouse, not in shame, but in quiet defiance. Adrian could keep his glass cage. She was done suffocating in it. Her mother's home in Queens smelled of comfort. Fresh coffee, clean laundry, a faint trace of lavender from the old curtains. For a few days, Lily allowed herself to heal there. She ate warm meals, walked slowly around the block for exercise, and listened to her mother's gentle encouragement. But most importantly, she planned. She began by organizing the recordings. Hours upon hours of Adrian's arrogance poured through her headphones each night. She transcribed the worst parts, marking the times when he mocked her, bragged about hiding assets, and hinted at illegal dealings. Each page of notes felt like armor sliding onto her body. Next, she contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, one of the top family attorneys in Manhattan. She walked into the office with her shoulders back, her hair brushed, her eyes clear. The receptionist looked surprised when Lily introduced herself. "You're Adrian Knight's wife?" "I am," Lily replied calmly. "And I'm ready to file for divorce." Inside the attorney's office, she laid out her evidence with steady hands. When the lawyer pressed play on the recordings, her heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. Adrian's voice filled the room, dripping with arrogance. The lawyer's eyebrows rose higher and higher with each passing minute. When the audio ended, the lawyer leaned back in his chair, his expression sharp. "Mrs. Knight, with this evidence, you're not just walking away with a divorce. You're walking away with everything. Custody, assets, reputation. He's finished." For the first time, Lily smiled. It wasn't the soft, hesitant smile of a woman still hoping to be saved. It was the smile of a woman who had found her own power. But her transformation wasn't just legal, it was personal too. Lily went shopping with her mother one afternoon. Not for designer gowns or flashy jewelry, but for clothes that made her feel like herself again. Tailored, elegant, confident. She cut her hair into a sleek style that framed her face, the weight of old memories falling to the salon floor. When she looked in the mirror afterward, she hardly recognized herself. She no longer saw the woman beaten down by betrayal. She saw someone reborn. Her mother squeezed her hand. "You look like the Lily I always knew was in there. Strong. Fierce." Step by step, Lily rebuilt herself. She exercised lightly to keep her body strong for the baby. She practiced speaking with confidence, rehearsing the words she would deliver in court. She even began journaling again, pouring her emotions into paper instead of letting them drown her. The whispers around her shifted too. Friends who had pitied her now looked at her with awe. "You're glowing," one said. "I don't know how you're doing it," Lily answered simply, "because I have to, for my child." Meanwhile, Adrian was still parading Celine across Europe, oblivious to the storm brewing back home. Paparazzi continued to photograph them, and Adrian continued to grin, convinced the world adored him. He had no idea that each smile, each careless appearance only sharpened the knife Lily now held. One evening, Lily stood in front of the mirror in her mother's bedroom, dressed in a navy maternity dress that hugged her growing belly gracefully. She placed her hands on her hips, tilted her chin, and whispered, "He thought I was weak. He thought I would break. But I am stronger than he'll ever be." Her phone buzzed, a message from her lawyer. "We're ready to proceed. Court date is set. Are you prepared?" Lily stared at the message, her reflection gazing back at her with newfound steel. She typed back, "More than ready." The next morning, she walked into the courthouse for the preliminary hearing. Reporters swarmed the steps, shouting questions, cameras flashing. For the first time, Lily didn't lower her head or hide. She stood tall, her hand resting on her belly, her new haircut catching the light. "Mrs. Knight," a reporter called out, "how do you respond to your husband's public affair?" Lily paused, turned toward the cameras, and spoke clearly. "The truth always comes out, and when it does, justice follows." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The quiet, invisible wife of Adrian Knight had just declared war. Inside, she sat calmly across from Adrian's legal team. Adrian himself wasn't present, still in Greece, still convinced she wouldn't dare fight. But when his lawyers pressed her with questions, Lily answered with poise. And when her attorney played the first clip of Adrian mocking her, the entire room went still. Even the opposing counsel shifted uncomfortably. That night, headlines erupted. Lily Knight strikes back. Pregnant wife faces millionaire with proof of betrayal. The same public that had pitied her now watched with fascination as she transformed from silent victim to formidable opponent. In her mother's living room later that night, Lily allowed herself a small smile. She wasn't done, not by a long shot, but she was no longer afraid. Because soon, Adrian Knight would be forced to face her in person. And for the first time in years, he would see a woman he no longer recognized. The day of the trial arrived with a gray sky over Manhattan. The courthouse loomed like a fortress, its stone walls weathered by decades of scandals, secrets, and shattered reputations. Reporters swarmed the steps, their microphones thrust forward, their cameras flashing like lightning. The world was waiting for the showdown between Adrian Knight, the millionaire who had flaunted his mistress, and Lily Knight, the pregnant wife he had underestimated. Lily arrived in a sleek black dress that framed her rounded belly with dignity and strength. Her mother walked beside her, carrying a quiet pride that made Lily feel taller. Behind them, her lawyer carried a thick folder. The recordings, the transcriptions, the proof that would dismantle Adrian's empire piece by piece. The crowd gasped as she ascended the courthouse steps. Once, they had whispered in pity. Today, they whispered in awe. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Adrian sat at the defendant's table, his tan from months in Greece still visible, his suit tailored to perfection. He flashed a smirk when he saw Lily enter, leaning back in his chair as if this were nothing more than another business negotiation. Celine sat behind him, dressed in designer clothes, her lips painted a bold red. She avoided Lily's gaze, but her smug smile told Lily all she needed to know. The judge entered, the room rising to its feet. When everyone was seated, the trial began. Adrian's attorney was the first to speak. He painted Adrian as a hard-working businessman, a husband who had struggled with the pressures of success, but who still provided generously for his wife. He downplayed the affair, dismissing it as rumors exaggerated by the press. Lily sat still, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. She waited. Then it was her lawyer's turn. He stood tall, his voice steady as he introduced the first piece of evidence. "Your Honor, we have recordings made from the defendant's personal vehicle, where he discusses not only his infidelity, but also his intent to defraud his wife and his company." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Adrian shifted in his seat, his smirk faltering for the first time. The audio played, Adrian's voice filling the silent courtroom. "She doesn't suspect a thing. She's too naive, too dependent. She'll never leave. Once the baby's born, she'll be tied down." Gasps erupted from the gallery. Celine paled. Adrian's jaw tightened. The second clip played. "I can't wait until the divorce. By the time she figures it out, she'll get scraps." The whispers grew louder. The judge banged the gavel for silence, but the damage was already done. Adrian's arrogance was laid bare for everyone to hear. Clip after clip revealed more. His mockery of Lily, his insults about her clothes, his boasts about hiding assets, even hints of shady deals that caught the attention of the press instantly. Each word was another nail in the coffin of his reputation. Celine's face turned crimson. She glanced at Adrian, but he refused to look at her. She had entered the courtroom expecting to watch Lily crumble. Instead, she watched the man she clung to unravel in front of everyone. When the final clip ended, Lily's lawyer turned toward her. "Mrs. Knight, why did you decide to bring these recordings forward?" Lily rose slowly, her belly visible beneath her dress, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Because my husband believed I was weak. He believed I would accept humiliation quietly, but I am not weak. I am a wife. I am a wife. I am a mother, and I will not let my child grow up thinking betrayal is power. I brought these recordings because the truth matters. And the truth is, he broke his vows, his trust, and his family. The gallery erupted into murmurs of admiration. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Adrian jumped to his feet, slamming his hands on the table. This is ridiculous. She's manipulating you. She's nothing without me. The judge's gavel cracked through the chaos. Mr. Knight, sit down, or you will be held in contempt. For the first time in his life, Adrian looked cornered. The smirk was gone, replaced by a thin sheen of sweat across his forehead. He sat down heavily, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with fury. Celine shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her earlier arrogance evaporating. She glanced toward the door, as if wondering if she should leave before the reporters swarmed her, too. Lily, meanwhile, felt the weight of the room shift. No longer was she the betrayed wife pitied by strangers. She was the woman who stood tall in the face of betrayal, who brought the mighty crashing down with nothing but the truth. The judge recessed for the day, announcing that closing arguments would come tomorrow. Reporters rushed out of the room, eager to broadcast what they had just witnessed. Outside the courthouse, the questions came like a flood. Mrs. Knight, do you think you'll win everything? Do you feel vindicated? Do you have a message for your husband? Lily paused at the top of the courthouse steps, her mother's hand steady on her arm. The cameras flashed wildly, the microphone stretched toward her. She lifted her chin, her voice calm but unshakable. My message is simple. Women are not weak. Betrayal has consequences, and justice will always find its way. The crowd erupted in cheers. Her words spread across every major network within hours, the story trending worldwide. Lily Knight had gone from victim to victor, from invisible to unforgettable. But as she stood there, the courthouse behind her and the world watching, she knew this wasn't the end. The legal battle still loomed. Adrian wasn't finished. Men like him never surrendered easily. And the very next day, when Adrian himself would be forced to take the stand, the entire world would see his empire collapse with his own words. The final day of the trial dawned bright, the sun cutting through the clouds as if the city itself knew something important was about to end. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse long before the doors opened. Reporters lining the steps, their voices buzzing with anticipation. The world wasn't just curious anymore, it was invested. Everyone wanted to see how Adrian Knight, once untouchable, would fall. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Adrian sat stiffly at the defendant's table, his suit pressed, his hair perfectly styled. But beneath the polish, he looked different. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale. The smirk that had once been his weapon was nowhere to be found. Beside him, Celine sat with crossed arms, her face tense. The arrogance she once wore like perfume had faded, replaced with unease. Lily entered the courtroom with quiet strength. She wore a cream dress that radiated dignity, her baby bump visible, her steps steady. She didn't look at Adrian. She didn't need to. Her presence alone shifted the energy in the room. The judge called the court to order. Adrian's lawyer announced that his client was ready to testify. The room hushed as Adrian walked to the witness stand, his shoulders squared in forced confidence. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. At first he tried to charm the court. He spoke about his success, his sacrifices, his claim that the recordings were taken out of context. He leaned into the microphone, insisting he had always cared for Lily, that his affair was a mistake blown out of proportion. But then Lily's attorney rose, holding a sheet of transcripts. Mr. Knight, do you deny saying these words? She'll never leave. Once the baby's born, she'll be tied down? Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't recall. The attorney pressed play. Adrian's voice filled the courtroom again, arrogant and unfiltered. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge's face hardened. Mr. Knight, the attorney continued, did you also say, by the time she figures it out, she'll get scraps? Did you not brag about hiding assets from your wife? Adrian shifted uncomfortably. That was locker room talk. I didn't mean. Another clip played. His laughter echoed, cruel and unmistakable. The attorney didn't stop. One by one, the recordings unraveled Adrian's image, exposing him not just as an unfaithful husband, but as a man plotting deceit. With each clip, Adrian grew smaller in the witness stand. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his voice cracking as he scrambled for excuses. Then came the final blow. "Mr. Knight," the attorney said, his voice sharp, "do you love your wife?" Adrian hesitated. For a split second, his mask cracked. He glanced at Lily, who sat serene and unflinching across the room. Her silence was louder than any answer. The attorney pressed again. "Do you love the mother of your child?" Adrian swallowed, his arrogance faltering completely. I don't know." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked. Whispers spread like wildfire. The judge banged the gavel for silence, but the damage was irreversible. In that single moment, Adrian Knight destroyed what little sympathy he might have had left. When closing arguments ended, the judge called for recess before delivering the verdict. Outside, reporters swarmed Celine. For the first time, she didn't smile for the cameras. Her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously. "No comment," she muttered, pushing through the crowd. Later, she would disappear from Adrian's life entirely, her dreams of luxury shattered by the weight of public disgrace. Back in the courtroom, everyone rose as the judge returned. His voice was firm, deliberate. "After reviewing the evidence, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Lily Knight. Custody of the unborn child is granted to her. Furthermore, given the overwhelming evidence of deceit and financial misconduct, the court awards her a substantial portion of the marital assets. Mr. Knight's behavior is reprehensible and unbecoming of a husband, a father, and a businessman." The gavel struck. It was over. Lily closed her eyes, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her mother gripped her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. The courtroom erupted in noise, reporters shouting questions, onlookers cheering quietly for justice. But Lily sat still, calm, centered. Adrian slumped in his chair, pale and broken. For the first time, the man who had once strutted across yachts and ballrooms looked small, defeated. Celine was gone. His reputation was ruined. His empire was crumbling. Lily stood, her head high, her hands resting gently on her belly. She walked past him without a glance. She didn't need revenge in words or gestures. The verdict was her victory. Her silence was louder than his downfall. Outside, the cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "Mrs. Knight, how do you feel?" She paused, her voice clear and steady. "I feel free. I feel strong. And I feel ready to raise my child with love, without fear, and without betrayal hanging over us." The crowd cheered. Headlines spread within minutes. "Pregnant wife triumphs over millionaire's betrayal. Lily Knight wins it all." Across the world, women watched and felt her victory as their own. Weeks later, Lily sat in the nursery. The crib was finally assembled. The walls painted a soft shade of yellow. Sunlight streamed through the curtains as she folded tiny baby clothes, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She no longer lived in the penthouse. She had sold it, choosing instead a home filled with warmth rather than cold marble. Her mother hummed softly in the kitchen. Friends visited often, bringing gifts, support, and admiration. The whispers of pity had been replaced with words of respect. Lily placed her hand on her belly, smiling as the baby kicked. "We did it," she whispered. We're safe now." When the baby was born, Lily cried tears of joy, holding the tiny bundle against her chest. The room was filled with love, with peace, with a sense of beginning. She no longer thought about Adrian, not with anger, not with longing. He was part of her past, but not her future. Her story had begun in betrayal, but it ended in triumph. And as she rocked her newborn to sleep, she whispered words she wished every woman could hear. "You are not weak, you are not worthless. And no betrayal, no matter how public, can take away your dignity when you choose to rise." So the story has come to a close, my dear friends. And yet, you're still here, aren't you? That tells me something deep inside this journey touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles. Maybe it whispered to you that even in betrayal, even in pain, there is a way forward. Life will break us, yes, but as the Stoics remind us, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Lily's courage shows us that even when the world humiliates you, even when someone you trust tears you down, you still carry the power to rise. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And isn't that what we all need to hear sometimes? That no matter how heavy the storm, we can choose how we stand in it. So if you've stayed until now, let's take this as a reminder together. Dignity is never lost unless we surrender it. Healing is always possible if we keep moving. And strength often grows in the very places where we were once broken. If this story touched you, if it gave you courage or comfort, then please, like this video, share it with someone who might need hope tonight. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll always have a place here with us. Because trust me, more stories are coming. Stories that will hold your heart, remind you of your worth, and walk with you through the hardest nights.